Have you ever wondered why the people who raised you, guided you, and seemed invincible for so long suddenly start acting in ways that puzzle or even frustrate you? Perhaps your father now refuses to throw away empty margarine containers, insisting they'll be useful someday. Maybe your mother tells the exact same story about her childhood every time you visit. Or your grandfather has become surprisingly blunt, saying things that make everyone at the dinner table shift uncomfortably in their chairs. These behaviors aren't signs of decline or stubbornness, though they might feel that way at first glance. They're actually windows into the complex emotional and physical landscape of aging, shaped by decades of experience, changing priorities, and the simple reality of growing older in a world that keeps moving forward. Today we're exploring 12 common habits that seniors develop, not to judge or criticize, but to understand the why behind the what, so you can respond with compassion rather than frustration. Let's start with something almost every family recognizes: the repeated story. Your loved one launches into a tale you've heard dozens of times before, complete with the same details, the same dramatic pauses, and the same punchline. You might catch yourself glancing at your watch or exchanging knowing looks with your siblings. But here's what's really happening beneath the surface. These stories aren't just random recollections. They're carefully preserved moments that define who this person is. That fishing trip your father mentions constantly. It might represent a time when he felt most alive, most capable, most connected to someone he loved. That recipe story your grandmother repeats. It links her to her own mother, to traditions that stretch back generations, to a time when she felt most herself. The urge to repeat these stories intensifies as people age, because the past becomes more vivid, while recent events fade. But it's rarely about memory loss, at least not initially. It's about keeping meaningful experiences alive, sharing the moments that shaped their identity, and hoping someone truly hears and understands the significance. When your father tells that fishing story again, he's not just recounting events. He's saying, "This mattered, I mattered. Remember me this way." The repetition provides comfort and continuity, bridging the gap between who they were and who they are now. So the next time you hear that familiar story beginning, try responding with fresh interest. Ask a question you haven't asked before. Show genuine curiosity about a detail. You might discover layers you missed in previous tellings, and more importantly, you'll validate the person sharing it with you. Now let's address something that might seem trivial but actually reveals deeper truths about aging: the constant discussion of aches and pains. Visit any senior center and you'll hear variations of the same conversation. "My knee has been acting up. My back went out last Tuesday. These pills aren't working like they used to." To younger people, this can sound like complaining, like an endless litany of medical woes that dominates every interaction. But step back and consider what's really happening. For the first time in their lives, many seniors are dealing with bodies that hurt, that don't respond the way they once did, that require constant management and attention. When they talk about these discomforts, they're not trying to bring everyone down. They're processing a fundamental shift in their daily experience. Pain becomes a companion, sometimes the most persistent relationship they have. Discussing it serves multiple purposes. It validates their experience, letting them know they're not alone or imagining things. It creates community with others who understand what it's like when simply getting out of bed requires strategy and determination. It opens the door to practical advice about remedies, doctors, or treatments that might help. And honestly, sometimes it's just a relief to say it out loud, to not pretend everything is fine when it very much isn't. This habit typically emerges gradually as the body accumulates the wear and tear of decades. That knee that was injured 40 years ago suddenly makes itself known with arthritis. That back that lifted children and moved furniture now protests at the smallest tasks. When seniors talk about these aches, they're navigating a new reality, where pain is no longer temporary, but ongoing. They're learning to live in bodies that feel increasingly unfamiliar. Rather than dismissing these conversations as negativity, try recognizing them as honest acknowledgement of a challenging adjustment. Sometimes all they need is someone to listen without trying to fix everything or minimize what they're experiencing. Here's a habit that drives families crazy but makes perfect sense when you understand its origins: hoarding small items. Walk into many seniors' homes and you'll find drawers full of rubber bands, plastic bags folded into precise triangles, margarine containers washed and stacked, twist ties organized by size, jars saved for possible future use. Younger family members see clutter and fire hazards. They suggest cleaning out, simplifying, letting go. But to the senior, every saved item represents preparedness and resourcefulness. This habit is rooted in experiences many younger people can't fully grasp. These seniors lived through or heard first-hand accounts of times when you didn't waste anything because resources were genuinely scarce. They remember when a rubber band or piece of string was valuable, when throwing away a perfectly good container seemed foolish, when you never knew what you might need tomorrow. That mentality doesn't just disappear because stores now overflow with cheap goods. It's embedded in how they see the world. Saving these items provides psychological comfort, a sense of control and readiness in a world that often feels beyond their control. There's also a practical element. Many seniors live on fixed incomes where every dollar counts. Why buy containers when you have perfectly good ones saved? Why purchase twist ties when you've collected dozens? What seems like irrational hoarding to outsiders is actually economical thinking to them. The challenge comes when the saving crosses into genuine clutter that creates safety hazards or living difficulties. If you need to address this habit, approach it with understanding rather than judgment. Acknowledge the wisdom of not wasting while gently pointing out when saved items exceed any reasonable future need. Offer to help organize rather than simply discard. Respect their need for some level of preparedness while working toward a safer, more manageable middle ground. Let's talk about something that can cause real tension in families. The loss of verbal filters. Your sweet grandmother suddenly comments that your new haircut makes you look like you stuck your finger in an electrical socket. Your formerly diplomatic grandfather announces at a family gathering that your uncle's new wife is clearly only interested in his money. Your mother, who once carefully measured every word, now delivers blunt opinions on politics, religion, parenting styles, and everything else without any apparent concern for who might be offended. This habit shocks people who remember these seniors as more tactful, more careful with their words. What happened? Several things, actually. First, there's often a biological component. The parts of the brain responsible for impulse control and social filtering can weaken with age, making it harder to stop thoughts from becoming spoken words. But equally important is a psychological shift. After decades of carefully navigating social expectations, of biting their tongues to keep peace, of prioritizing others' feelings over honest expression, many seniors simply decide they're done with all that. They've earned the right, in their minds, to speak their truth. They've lived long enough to know that sugarcoating rarely changes anything important. They've watched time pass and people die, and realized that being polite about things that matter seems increasingly pointless. So they say what they think. Sometimes this delivers valuable wisdom that younger people need to hear, even if the delivery is rough. Sometimes it's genuinely funny, cutting through pretense with refreshing directness. And yes, sometimes it's hurtful or inappropriate, crossing lines that should be respected regardless of age. If you're dealing with a loved one who has lost their filter, remember that the intent is rarely malicious. They're not trying to hurt you, even when their words sting. They're expressing themselves with a freedom they've never allowed before. That doesn't mean you have to accept hurtful comments without response. You can gently point out when something crosses a line, setting boundaries while acknowledging their right to honest expression. The key is balancing respect for their new directness with maintaining kindness and consideration in family relationships. Here's a habit that seems harmless but can actually impact health. Eating the same meals repeatedly. Your father has eaten the exact same breakfast for 15 years. Your mother rotates between the same 4 dinners week after week. Your aunt won't try any restaurant she hasn't been to before. This dietary rigidity puzzles people who enjoy variety and experimentation with food. Why limit yourself this way? The answer involves multiple factors working together. There's comfort. These familiar meals represent stability in lives where so much else has changed. They're connected to positive memories, to times when taste buds worked better and appetite was stronger. There's also simplicity. Planning, shopping for, and preparing the same meals requires less mental energy than constantly trying new things. When you know exactly what you need and how to make it, grocery shopping becomes automatic rather than overwhelming. For seniors dealing with reduced energy or cognitive capacity, this efficiency matters enormously. Additionally, aging often changes taste and smell, making food less appealing overall. When you find meals you still genuinely enjoy, you naturally stick with them. Why experiment when experiments often disappoint? There's also the reality of living alone for many seniors. Cooking elaborate varied meals for one person feels pointless. The same simple meals make more sense. However, this habit can lead to nutritional deficiencies when variety decreases too much. The same meals daily might not provide all necessary nutrients, especially if those meals weren't particularly balanced to begin with. If you're concerned about a loved one's limited diet, approach it thoughtfully. Don't criticize their current choices. Instead, look for ways to add variety within their comfort zone. If they love that breakfast, great, but could you introduce a new fruit on the side? If they always make the same casserole, could you find a slight variation that maintains the familiar base? Small additions are more likely to be accepted than dramatic overhauls, and sometimes, honestly, the comfort they get from familiar foods outweighs the benefits of forced variety. Choose your battles wisely. Let's address something families often find distressing: declining attention to personal grooming. Your once impeccably dressed father now wears the same shirt 3 days running. Your mother, who never left the house without makeup, now goes weeks without bothering. Hair goes unwashed longer, shaving becomes optional. Clothing choices prioritize comfort over appearance. This shift can worry families who wonder if it signals depression, dementia, or giving up on life. Sometimes those concerns are valid and worth investigating. But often, this habit reflects different priorities and physical realities. Grooming tasks that once seemed simple become genuinely difficult. Arthritis makes buttons and zippers challenging. Balance problems make showering scary. A fall waiting to happen. Reduced flexibility makes it hard to reach feet for toenail trimming or backs for washing. Vision problems make grooming in mirrors difficult. These practical barriers accumulate until grooming requires significant effort and assistance, neither of which are easy to ask for or accept. There's also a psychological component. After decades of carefully maintaining appearances for work, for social expectations, for others' judgment, some seniors simply decide they're finished with all that. They've earned the right, they feel, to prioritize comfort over looks. If nobody important is seeing them, why go through the effort? This attitude can reflect healthy self-acceptance and freedom from superficial concerns, or it can indicate withdrawal and loss of self-worth. The difference matters. If you're worried about a loved one's grooming decline, start by understanding the why. Is it physical difficulty? Offer specific help, like assistance with hair washing or setting up shower safety equipment. Is it depression or isolation? Address the underlying emotional issues rather than just the grooming symptoms. Is it simple deprioritization? Respect their choices while gently encouraging basic hygiene for health reasons. The goal isn't forcing them back to previous standards, but ensuring they feel clean, comfortable, and dignified in whatever way works for their current reality. Here's something many people notice but don't know how to address: decreased patience. The grandmother who was once endlessly patient with small children now snaps at minor annoyances. The easygoing grandfather now fumes in lines at the store. The parent who taught you tolerance now complains constantly about slow drivers, loud neighbors, and inefficient service. This shortened fuse can make interactions tense and relationships difficult. Understanding this habit requires empathy for what seniors experience daily. Chronic pain alone erodes patience. When everything hurts, when simply existing is uncomfortable, it takes tremendous energy to maintain composure through additional frustrations. Add reduced mobility that makes every errand exhausting. Add cognitive changes that make following complex conversations difficult. Add a lifetime of accumulated pet peeves that have never been resolved. The patience reservoir that once seemed bottomless is now running on empty. There's also a wisdom component that people miss. Seniors have figured out what actually matters in life. They've seen people waste time on trivial concerns while ignoring what's important. They've learned that most social niceties are empty rituals. So they become less willing to pretend interest in small talk, less patient with inefficiency, less tolerant of wasted time. They want to spend their remaining time, which they know is limited, on things that genuinely matter to them. Superficial politeness and patience with nonsense don't make that list anymore. This doesn't excuse genuine rudeness or mean behavior, which should still be addressed kindly but firmly, but it does help explain why the patient person you knew now seems perpetually irritated. They're not becoming mean. They're tired, hurting, and acutely aware that time is precious. If you're on the receiving end of this decreased patience, try not to take it personally. Recognize the pain and exhaustion behind the short temper, and when possible, help reduce the frustrations that trigger impatience, whether that's longer checkout times or complicated explanations. Let's discuss a habit that worries families deeply: social withdrawal. Your once outgoing parent now declines every invitation. Your formerly social grandmother spends days without speaking to anyone. The senior who used to host every holiday now rarely leaves home. This isolation can happen gradually, so slowly that families don't notice until it's become entrenched. One declined invitation becomes a pattern, becomes a lifestyle of solitude. Multiple factors drive this withdrawal. Losing friends and spouses to death creates grief and makes social situations painful reminders of who's missing. Retirement eliminates the built-in social structure of work. Mobility challenges make leaving home difficult and exhausting. Hearing or vision problems make social situations frustrating rather than enjoyable, as conversations become hard to follow and faces hard to see. Financial concerns make spending money on social activities feel wasteful. And sometimes, honestly, seniors just get tired of the effort social interaction requires. The danger of this habit is real. Social isolation dramatically increases risks for depression, cognitive decline, and even early death. Humans are social creatures regardless of age. We need connection and community to thrive. The challenge is that addressing isolation requires understanding its specific causes for each person. Grief-driven isolation needs different solutions than mobility-driven isolation. Someone withdrawing due to hearing loss needs hearing aids and patient friends who speak clearly, not just more invitations to loud restaurants. If someone you love is isolating, start with curiosity rather than judgment. Ask what would make social connection appealing rather than burdensome. Would smaller gatherings work better than large parties? Would visits at their home be easier than going out? Would specific transportation help? Would addressing a medical issue like hearing loss remove a barrier? Sometimes isolation is temporary and self-resolving as people work through grief or adjustment. But chronic isolation needs intervention, offered with love and respect for their autonomy. Here's a habit that can feel like living in the past rather than the present. Excessive dwelling on previous decades. Your loved one constantly talks about how things used to be, about people who are gone, about opportunities missed or mistakes made. Every conversation somehow circles back to decades ago. While some reminiscence is natural and healthy, excessive focus on the past can prevent enjoying the present and planning for whatever future remains. This habit serves important purposes. Reviewing life helps seniors make sense of their journey, finding meaning and patterns in their experiences. It's part of accepting mortality and one's legacy. Memories of better times provide comfort when the present is difficult or disappointing. Reflecting on the past helps maintain identity when so much else is changing. These are valuable, even necessary, processes. The problem emerges when past focus becomes so dominant that present moments are missed. Present relationships are neglected, and present joys are overlooked. Dwelling on regrets can be particularly painful. What if I'd taken that job? What if I'd married someone else? What if I'd been a better parent? These what-ifs can haunt seniors, especially those facing mortality and the reality that there's no time left to make different choices. This rumination can lead to depression and bitterness that poisons remaining relationships and experiences. The past can't be changed, but endless review of its disappointments ensures present unhappiness. If someone you care about is trapped in the past, help them balance reminiscence with present engagement. Honor their memories and the importance of their history while gently redirecting attention to current experiences and relationships. Create new positive memories together rather than only rehashing old ones. Help them focus on what remains possible rather than what's gone. And if their dwelling seems connected to unresolved regrets or grief, consider whether counseling might help them process these feelings more productively. Let's address something that causes significant stress: excessive financial worry. Even seniors with comfortable savings and secure retirement income sometimes obsess over money. They constantly check bank accounts, agonize over small purchases, refuse to spend money on things they'd enjoy or benefit from. They keep the house too cold in winter and too hot in summer to save utility costs. They wear threadbare clothes and eat the cheapest food. They decline activities with friends because of the expense. This habit has deep roots. Many seniors lived through economic hardship that taught them scarcity mindset. They remember times when money was genuinely tight, when one unexpected expense could trigger disaster. That anxiety doesn't disappear just because their current financial situation is stable. There's also the reality that seniors often are on fixed incomes with limited ability to earn more if savings run out. Healthcare costs, which can be unpredictable and enormous, loom as constant threats. The fear of becoming a financial burden on children adds another layer of anxiety. What makes this habit particularly unfortunate is that excessive worry about money can prevent seniors from enjoying the resources they've spent a lifetime accumulating. They sacrifice comfort, health, and joy to preserve savings they may never have the chance to use. They're so focused on having enough for an uncertain future that they forget to live in the present they're in now. Meanwhile, families sometimes don't realize the depth of financial anxiety until it manifests in concerning behaviors like skipping medications to save money. If someone you love is consumed with financial worry, approach it with understanding rather than dismissal. Validate their concerns rather than simply telling them they have enough. Perhaps help them work with a financial advisor to create clear plans for different scenarios, which can ease anxiety. Help them distinguish between reasonable caution and excessive restriction. Encourage small steps toward enjoying their resources, like that restaurant they love or activity they've avoided due to cost. Remind them that they worked hard and saved specifically to have security and comfort in these years. Money in the bank means nothing if life is miserable. Here's a habit that can be both endearing and frustrating: becoming set in their ways. Your father insists on taking the exact same walk every morning, same route, same time, regardless of weather. Your mother will only buy one specific brand of coffee and becomes upset if the store is out of it. Your grandfather refuses to try any new technology and insists on doing everything the old way, even when it's clearly harder. This rigidity around routines and preferences can make flexibility difficult and adaptability to necessary changes nearly impossible. This habit provides comfort and control. When so much in life is uncertain and changing, maintaining familiar routines creates stability and predictability. There's security in knowing exactly what comes next, in having some aspects of life remain constant. These preferences and routines have often been refined over decades into what works best for them. That coffee brand isn't just stubborn loyalty. It's the result of years of trial and error that identified exactly what they like. That walking route isn't random. It's safe, familiar, manageable, perhaps connected to pleasant memories. There's also often wisdom embedded in these seemingly stubborn preferences. They've learned what works for them and see no reason to change it. Why experiment with new methods when the old one functions perfectly well? Why risk disappointment with unfamiliar brands when they know the current one satisfies? From their perspective, the preference for familiar ways is sensible, not stubborn. The challenge comes when their rigid routines create problems or prevent beneficial changes, like refusing necessary medical treatments because they're new or different from what they're used to. If you're dealing with someone stuck in their ways, recognize the comfort and logic behind their preferences while gently encouraging openness when it truly matters. Pick your battles. Does it really matter if they take the same walk daily? Probably not. Does it matter if they refuse a helpful medical intervention? Absolutely. Save your energy for the important disagreements, not the harmless quirks. Finally, let's discuss perhaps the most concerning habit, ignoring their own needs. Your mother, who once carefully attended to her health, now skips medical appointments. Your father, who raised you to never ignore problems, now dismisses worrying symptoms. Your grandmother, who taught you self-care, now never does anything just for herself. They put everyone else first, addressing others' needs while neglecting their own health, comfort, and well-being. This habit often stems from a lifetime of caregiving, particularly for women who spent decades putting children and spouses first. That pattern becomes so ingrained that they genuinely don't know how to prioritize themselves. There's also often discomfort with asking for help or admitting vulnerability. They've been the strong ones, the helpers, the caregivers. Acknowledging that they now need to care for themselves feels like failure or weakness. They minimize symptoms and skip appointments partly out of denial, hoping that if they don't address problems, the problems don't really exist. Take a moment now to think about one senior in your life and one habit they've developed. Rather than judging it, consider what needs it might be meeting for them, what discomfort it might be easing, what control it might be providing. Then decide how you might respond differently next time, with more understanding and less frustration. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us which habit resonated most with you, or how you've learned to lovingly navigate these changes with seniors in your life. And subscribe to our channel for more honest conversations about aging, health, and relationships. Your engagement helps us reach more people who need this perspective. Here's to understanding each other better across the generations.